evening, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Abigail Richardson. If you recall, Mr. Miller and Mr. Bravo do a wonderful job of reading all of our donations every time. And last meeting when they read through the donations, one of them jumped out of my head, mostly because I happen to know the Richardsons, but also because of the sheer amount of books that were donated. So I'm going to read a little bit about Abigail because I think that this is really a remarkable accomplishment. Abigail is an 8th grader currently enrolled at Miller South School for the Visual and Performing Arts. Abigail's primary art interest is violins and strings. She began to play the violin at age 3. Her secondary interest is vocal performance. Abigail also loves to read. She has shared her love of reading through her service to the community. She serves as a volunteer for the Baby and Toddler Time program at Highland Square Branch Library of the Akron Summit County Public Library. Through her service, she recognized that some youth of our community did not have access to books of their own in their homes. So she expressed concern to her friends and family and led to a campaign to collect books that were donated to Reach Out and Read and Project Rise. To date, her activism has resulted in the collection of 1,661 books that will be distributed to youth within the greater Akron area. Abigail Richardson strives toward excellence in all of her endeavors, including projects that inspire others to soar high. Thank you, Abigail, for being an excellent representation of your family, your community, your school, and the Akron Public School District. Welcome, Abigail.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wow. I'll have to tell you to smile already. Thank you.
She's a good part, they smile. Do you want to introduce who came with you?
So I came with my family, my dad, Robert Richardson, my brother Ian Richardson, my mom Laura Richardson, and also my principal, Mrs. Wilson, came from my school, Billy So.
So one of the reasons I asked that she introduce her family is we usually do, but I also wanted you to know that when we got done with the meeting on that Monday night, I immediately Facebooked her mom and said, "Is this your Abigail Richardson? I mean, our Abigail Richardson?" She's like, "Yes, that's the one." And she said something about how much they were happy to have given the books, not just because they were happy to give the books, but why? Because they also got their garage back. They stored all the books in their garage. So her family also deserves to be honored for all of their sacrifice and hard work too. Thank you so much.
Can I ask, are you still collecting books, or this was a project and it's finished, or?
No, it just finished recently.
Your mom said we could start again.
Well, and we do have other great organizations like First Book of Greater Akron that collect books, and it's such a worthwhile cause. And this one's a little close. I realized a couple of years ago when I went to Barnes and Noble. And I get my son books for every major, for birthday and for Christmas and all that. 3 items I walked out of there, and I probably shouldn't have said the name, but 3 items and I walk out of there, and it was close to $60. And I thought, well, there are so many kids and families that can't afford to buy brand new books at that amount. So good job for you, and congratulations. I mean, that was amazing. Yeah.
Now, I know that Ian has told me he has hockey, and Abigail has swim, so we're going to let them sneak out of here and go on with this beautiful day. But thank you so much for giving as you did and for coming today to be recognized. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry, Barnes and Noble.
How about some community and school reflection?
And they do great things for us, but
Sorry, Brian.
Just briefly, I was able to go to both of them, North and Kenmore, and it was enlightening to go to the schools to see how quiet it was in the schools, the teaching and learning that was going on. So I think that they should be commended on that, and I want them to continue because that's really important that they learn and teachers really teach. So I just wanted to give them a little shout out because I was in those buildings.
You know, these last few weeks have been somewhat challenging, or could have been, I think, if we had not had the kind of machinery that we have at Akron Public Schools. You know, I always kind of have a tendency to poke at Mark Williamson, but he just did a phenomenal job. And I don't want to minimize the work that the superintendent did and the other folks did to kind of allay fear and kind of answer questions from parents and the community around the whole Ebola crisis. But the abilities to kind of get information out that people can use and then balance the media that can be so very, very crazy. But he did it with such ease. I kind of marveled at him. So I just wanted to give him a shout out publicly. Although we go back to our same relationship tomorrow. But just a great job by the whole team. And it was very hard to keep up with, and really it was very fast paced and things were changing all the time, you know, and parents and even students wanting to know what was what. I mean, it just did a phenomenal job. And hats off to the superintendent, the assistant superintendent for the great work.
Not to steal anything, because I'm sure you'll have something to probably say about it too, but since we opened it up, I want to say kudos to the leadership and staff as well. I mean, and it's so difficult to sit back and sort of backseat drive or Monday night quarterback any decisions that are made. I think the superintendent did an excellent job. I think he made the right calls on all counts. I think the staff and the leadership here did an amazing job. And anytime the safety of our kids are involved or is involved, I don't think you can second guess, those types of decisions. I think they were well made with the information that we had, and I think people felt comfortable, people felt good, and they felt safe, and they felt like we were doing the right thing. So, nice job.
On Saturday, I love our facilities. I just want to say we have visitors from across the state. We hosted Maurice Claret for a youth forum, and they were just really floored by how amazing Book to CLC looks and what that facility is used for. We had a good showing for the presentation, kind of moderate good showing for the forum, but overall the message, the community, and for young people about the hope of starting over even when you fall down, and to admonish us as supporters of our youth that we really don't know what's inside of them. So our charge is to come alongside of them, to support them the best way that we can, no matter what their circumstances are. And I think that we do a very good job of that. And it's not an afterthought, it's an intentional thing. It's interwoven in the work that we do, and I'm proud of that. So it was good event. I thank you all for the board support and helping us to bring him here.
I had the opportunity to go and to listen to Rita Dove, who was being sponsored by Project Learn, and that area that deals with adult population to help them to learn. And two students read their poems. One was just coming from another area in the world to America and wrote a poem after reading and gaining strength from that and hoping to get her GED so she could move on further. Another young lady read her poem as well. And that was done to encourage them. And then, of course, Rita Dove read many of her poems and shared personal experiences growing up in Akron. Had the pleasure of pastoring her parents for almost 17 years. So it was great to see her again and see her her other family members, and just to know that Akron, I never knew anything about Akron. And then having come in here over 20 years ago, it seemed like every time I turn around, there's something about Akron. And the personalities who come out of Akron. And to show everyone that even in Akron, many persons can blossom to be great personalities, not only in this country, but in the world, poet laureate, and of course, Mr. LeBron James, an athlete. But look at all the possibilities that we offer here in Akron. A book to high school graduate. So just wonderful things that we offer in the Akron Public Schools. And then the other, I had an opportunity to, again, thanks to Sister Sims, and encouraged me to go to a meeting where I thought she was going to be also. But but she was with the superintendent, so I had to be at another place. And at that meeting with some other clergy persons and city council members, I was able, because of information you gave about the flu shot, to share with all of them. And then the next day, it was in the paper. So they were able to then encourage their congregation, encourage their members to take advantage of that. So hopefully, the next time we do something like that, we can get a little bit more than 20%, so that we can get a higher rating of people getting their flu shot taken. So what I took from here, I was in an environment where I could tell other clergy persons to get their congregation involved, and then for them, it was, again, emphasized again by the article in the paper.
I know somebody said something that says, but I didn't want to miss this. You know, I'm a part of leadership Akron class 31, for those who did 31. And Education Day was last week, and Carla and Assistant Superintendent Dr. Williams, McWilliams, and we started at Finley Elementary School. And I mean, I thought I knew a little something about all the, you know, the going on, if you will. But I think we really showcased what the Akron Public Schools do in such a phenomenal way that, I mean, it left people who had no idea of the work that goes on and all that we offer, kind of left their mouths really hanging. And I apologize to the superintendent of Barberton for our theft. And she forgave us, but she was there, and we had a kind of like a round table with the Superintendent James and her. It was just very, very good.
For those who don't know, we took Mr. Pendleton from Barberton. We didn't actually steal from Barberton. Just for those who don't know what that meant.
Yeah, we were talking about finances, but just a phenomenal job. We kind of went through this exercise that at the beginning we had to make decisions about what's the best track for our students, and it just really illuminated some of the challenges that our principals or administrators have in making decisions that they have to make about what is best for our students. And it's not always as clear as we think the role ought to be because of so many challenges. But at the end of the day, the right choices are made. I mean, they were like case studies. And you would think it was something that someone made up. I mean, you at least are hoping that was the case. But to see the students come in and end that the actual stories were about, and to see how well they progressed based on the decisions that we made, man, it was amazing. And I know I'm pretty animated, but this I'm telling the truth. It was really, see, you're with me. It was really, 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 really good. So, thank you.
Where else did you go when you went?
We went to Bookville CLC, we went to Miller South, and went to Finley.
Nice. And Nipsdale.
And NIFSTEM, the middle school.
I have two quick things, a little more somber than everyone else's. I don't know whether this article was sent me from a taxpayer, an Akron resident, from Business Week magazine, and whether it was in jest or whether it was serious, it talks about the bulletproof classroom. And in it, they talk about different things that are made for purposes of protecting our children from some kind of awful event like Columbine or what have you. that have to do with dry erase boards that are made out of some kind of material that can repel firearm shots. And the thing that I thought was a positive was it's something, because we always think we need somebody with an armed guard or something to protect our kids, but that's more bullets flying through the air, whereas if we had one of these whiteboards in each classroom, we at least have a teacher that can try and repel the person. Worth exploring, I think, because I think, thank the Lord, we've not had anything like that happen. But we see what happens to Sandy Cliff, I think it was called, or a Columbine when the unthinkable happens. So I don't know, I'm going to keep this, I'm going to bring it up in some of our meetings and see what people think, because they're very expensive. A 4-pound 2x4 dry board is like $400 right now. Anyway, I thought I'd bring that to our attention because I thought someone sent this to me and I thought it was interesting. It could be spun into something positive. Additionally, the Portage County Public Schools sponsored a Supreme Court argument day before their schools, and it was well attended. And I'm thinking, why don't we try this? And because I'm in the legal system and I know a couple of the higher-ups, namely the Chief Justice, at least socially, that I would explore whether it's possible for us to get that to happen here. We've got a lot of kids that may want to see what it's like to be in an oral argument, or find out from the justices what their career paths were and that sort of thing. So that was the other thing that I thought was interesting that I wanted to bring to the panel's attention and the public. Thank you.
We already do something with local judges.
We have Law Day
Yeah.
at the University of Akron.
Interesting. Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Right, we have kind of a surprise, and he did come in, so I'm very excited. I'm going to ask Mr. Livingston if he would please come up. I know. He's like, what? All right, I'm going to read a little bit about Doug. He is a native of Youngstown and a 2001 graduate of Matthew High School. He moved to Columbus to attend Ohio State University, the Ohio State University. That's as close as you're going to come, huh? He became involved in full-time work at UPS. Discouraged by his direction, he returned to the Mahoning Valley in 2008 to study journalism at Youngstown State University. A former editor-in-chief for YSU's student newspaper, Doug interned at the Youngstown Vindicator and Ohio.com while freelancing for Crane's Cleveland Business and Warren Tribune Chronicle. You don't have to redo the pledge or anything, so don't worry. He also worked as a reporter and managing editor for the news outlet, a journalism lab working in collaboration with professional media partners. Upon completion of his degree, he joined the Beacon Journal in November 2012 as the education writer. He received an Ohio AP Award in 2013 for his freelance investigative work published while he was still at YSU. He also has many other honors, including one from the Education Writers Association, the Ohio APME, two from the Press Club of Cleveland, and one from the NABG 2014 Salute to Excellence Awards, and most recently, Ohio's Best Journalism Awards that were just this past Saturday. He won 3 first-place awards. Tonight, to add to his incredible collection of awards, he's going to love this one as well, it is my pleasure to present a certificate to Doug. He was recently nominated by 3 separate school districts, including the Akron Public Schools, Coventry Local Schools, and Green Local Schools, to become a member of the 2014 OSBA Media Honor Roll. To thank him, and so tonight we're here to thank him for his fair and balanced educational reporting and exemplary service to our community. So, Doug.
I know, you're gonna kill me. All right. Yeah, you gotta smile. This is all you get.
The only thing, I joined the Beacon before I graduated. I haven't shown them my degree yet, so.
Interesting.
Right about sweet.
That was just the face, the look on his face was worth the whole show. He did. All right, now we have a report from our superintendent.
I just wanted to take time to give you an update on where we're at with our, I won't even call it our local health crisis, but let's see. Please do, Mr. Pennington.
My fault later. Right. There we go. Bring trust over there.
So anyway, I wanted to kind of clear up some of the confusion that we had, in the community regarding this issue with the Ebola virus. Again, a lot of this stuff came out the week before last, and it happened so fast. I mean, that Friday we were in here until 9 o'clock trying to figure out what we're going to do, for over the weekend and the following week. But we do know it impacted Resnick School, it impacted Schumacher to some extent, and North High School as well. In the middle of the red circle, of course, is the Dallas nurse who was here. There are only 2 people from that incident in Dallas, that were infected, and those were people who worked very closely with Mr. Duncan before he died, where he was his most contagious and infectious state. Exposure to a lot of body fluid. So the Dallas nurse comes to northeastern Ohio. There are 2 people in that tier 1 who had contact with her while she was here, and that primarily was through hugging, okay? Being close with a family member. So there are 2 people in Summit County who were quarantined, and what that meant is they were just, they had to stay home. The health department sent people to the home twice a day to take the temperature. They also had to call in temperatures at other times to monitor them. The incubation period could be anywhere for as soon as 2 days, typically 8 to 10, or as long as 21. It could be longer, but we're working with the 21 days. So those 2 people really had no contact with Akron Public Schools as far as we know, but they just had contact directly with the nurse. In tier 2, these are people who had contact with either the Dallas nurse, but not that close. There's on our risk part of the diagram, you'll see for tier 2, there are 23 people in Summit County in that classification.
They had no direct skin or membrane contact, but they were in the same space as the Dallas nurse, such as the bridal shop or on the airplane that brought her here. In that group of 23 people, we know that there is one student who attends Akron Public Schools, and that student is on home instruction. We actually provided the computer and all of the access to their schoolwork so they could continue while they're being monitored by the health department. It is low risk, and as we said, with the working with the CDC and the Summit County Department of Public Health, that this is our first go around with this, so we may change our policy later, but that student represented very low risk of infection. Again, to our knowledge, that student does not have any symptoms of Ebola infection. And then if you go to Tier 3, which is the one where there are 16 people in Summit County, again, no direct skin contact. They could have been in the same space, but weren't in that space for an extended period of time. Those they're asked to self-monitor their temperature, and if they note a change, to call the health department about that. We have one student in Akron Public Schools who's in Tier 3, so that student, again, has home instruction, access to their class materials, and is being monitored. The one item that is kind of difficult to explain to people is at one of our schools, we had a student who's actually just outside of Tier 3. They're a family member living in the same house of someone who is on mandatory monitoring. That caused a lot of consternation in that school. We met with teachers, we also met with parents in 2 separate meetings. That student represented no risk, but for the layperson, it's hard to understand how someone can be at home being monitored by the health department, and then you have a family member who's in close contact with that person coming in and out. The issue is that none of those folks have shown any symptoms, any fever, or what have you. And so I give Gene Nixon Doniscota with the Summit County Public Health Department, Dr. Margot Ermy, the gentleman, Dr. Brayton from the CDC, a lot of credit, because these people took a lot of time out to actually come to our meetings, whether it was the meeting we had at Firestone or the 2 meetings we had at Resnick or the meeting we had at North High School. I mean, they took a lot out of their time when they're busy, trying to manage this whole process. So, this chart just kind of represents how we dealt with, the problem in terms of Akron Public Schools. As we digest this and review the whole issue, after Monday, when that 21 days is over, I'm sure we'll have some changes, in our approach. I mean, all of our staff, all of my staff have been just terrific in this whole thing. I probably lost more hair because of it, and I think you all should put me on a 21-day somewhere in the Bahamas, because it really was. I mean, all the phone calls, people who were really fearful. A couple of other things I just want to mention that, if it wasn't for curriculum instruction doing blizzard bags last year, we would have had a hard time having kids on home instruction without having to send a home instructor to the home. And then also today I heard from our custodial group who had some concerns and want some additional information, which we'll provide them. We had buildings cleaned, and that was one of the disagreements that we had with the health department, or differences of opinion, is that cleaning really did nothing because there was no Ebola in the buildings. But it helped make our parents at ease, our staff at ease, and so we did that, and would probably do it again, if asked. And if anything, it helps clean the viruses from the flu. The product that we use in Akron Public Schools kills a lot of different germs, and the health department did do some research for us, and Ebola is one of them. But again, very, very low risk. The virus doesn't survive too long outside of the body on a hard surface. So, that's where we're at now. I remember in talking with the health department, they said that yesterday was kind of the turning the corner day, that if any of those folks who are being monitored do not exhibit any fevers or any of the symptoms, that we're probably going to get through this. I know there are some other states that are doing things maybe a little bit differently at first, but they kind of switched to the Ohio model where, if you really, if you're in tier 1, you're probably going to be at home being monitored. And I know that change was made, but that's really where we're at now with this, and we are still working in close connections with the health department just to make sure we're monitoring folks, and so when they get the all clear, they can, our students can actually, the 2 that are out can actually return back to school without having missed a beat. And that was really important, to Karen Gijic and some of our curriculum specialists. It really worked, well to get the, the schoolwork for these students so they don't miss that. Yes.
Do we have a plan for some celebratory or introduction back for the young people?
Yeah, that'll be, I thought about that. I kind of mentioned it at one of our meetings. I said, at some point this whole crisis is going to be over, and then what are we going to do for people that we were like, I don't want you around me? So we'll be addressing that this week and making some connections to the building so that that's a real seamless, and it is a great home to have those kids back. No? Yes. All right.
I was just thinking, would it be, just for thought, could it be something where we give the kid at least an award of courage or something that kind of stands out for them?
I think that's something we would have to really work with their parents, because that's a real delicate, situation for a child who's, you have a lot of people who were not in favor of those kids, coming to school and making sure they stayed at home. So, that would be something we can get some input from the health department because they've been dealing with the parents. So.
We haven't identified
Right,
students.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all confidential as to who the students are.
All right.
Did we create this?
Yes,
I know we
we
had
did.
some discussion about other school districts' interest in it.
Yeah, so we put up the go copyright sign. But yeah, I forget, Mark Williamson got the call. Was it Rhode Island or New Jersey had asked for it, and we freely share a lot of our items that we create, particularly when there's a crisis, to be helpful to other school districts. So we passed it along to the Summit County superintendents through the ESC, and also pass it on to the Ohio Department of Education.
We used it when we sent it out to all of our Head Start parents.
All right.
He also really liked that. The doctor from the CDC asked if they could use it as well. That Ellen and Mary Kelly were the ones who designed it, and I grabbed the card and made it pretty.
Good job.
I'm going to use President's prerogative for a second while the superintendent gets himself together, because I was going to talk just a little bit about the handling of the crisis as well in my President's report. So I wanted to definitely thank the health department. They were remarkable from, they had been here all morning that Thursday when I walked in, and they were willing to answer our questions. They were here for the press conferences. They were there for the parents' meetings. David was in constant consultation with them, and it helped us as a district to separate fear from fact and keep people as calm as we possibly could. So I just wanted to say that. I can't say enough nice things about the superintendent. I literally talked to him those couple of days more than I think I talked to my own family. I know I went over on my Verizon minutes this month, and between my husband and I, we're blaming that definitely on this crisis. But that was remarkable. I can tell you that there were folks here at all hours dealing with it over the weekend. Mr. Williamson and his team, like Veronica mentioned earlier, Ellen and Mary Kelly and Mark Black and all of the folks that you see that sit around this table, who most people don't know what they do, were working crazy hours trying to make sure not only were the kids safe, but that they felt comfortable and that we got all the information out that we needed to. I stopped in and talked to Deb and thanked her again for her hard work that just so many of the people that do that work go, and the custodians who were on call to clean the buildings on a moment's notice, and then off or on, or whether we needed to clean or not clean, they were right there. And also the teachers union who worked with us and was there, you know, helping to get out the information to their folks so that everyone was on the same page and understood. And it's great when we can all work together. It's one of the things I'm most proud of about this district is not only we come together in good times and in bad and really work together, and I think it was really seamless, and I think it's fantastic that someone like the state of New Jersey would take notice of something that we're doing in Akron. I think they should take more notice considering some of the hyperbole that's coming out of New Jersey, so maybe they'll take a little bit more. I also wanted to commend Ms. Folk on the flu shots. I went to Firestone and got flu mist last week because we were eligible and they billed my insurance, and that's just the way it should work, and it was so much easier to walk into my neighborhood school than to, as a parent, to have my kids have the ability to have that done. And Deb sent us numbers today. It was what was it, Deb? 1,900?
1,948.
Students and staff that received flu vaccine last week, so 1,948, and they've already asked to come back next year.
That's correct.
And we're hoping that next year we won't be, you know, in the middle of a crisis that could make people more nervous about things, and maybe with a year's time it'll actually even make them more inclined to do the flu vaccine. We made the national news with that. It was nice with the kids in the background getting their flu shots from Cyberlink. So just wanted to also say, you know, how wonderful that was to have that done, and it was smooth and simple, and the nurses that work with us in conjunction with us were just wonderful, and the health heroes. I'm still wearing my band. I wore it one more time so that I could have it. It glows in the dark. It scares me to death in the middle of the night when I wake up, but it's very cool. So thank you again, everyone, for pulling together and all that. We will move on. We need approval of meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any questions, corrections? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardi?
I'm going to abstain.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Sims?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Superintendent's recommendations.
Madam President, I have before me for your consideration 36 personnel recommendations. These recommendations are on proper form, and I move their approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any questions, concerns about personnel? Just want to mention a few people that I see in retirement that have been really meaningful. Eric Langreeder has been with the district, I think, his whole career, and he's been at Miller South for quite a long time, and he will be sorely missed. I always tell him he doesn't look old enough to retire, and that he must have a picture in his attic that's aging instead of him. But so we're going to be having to replace him at Miller South. And also I wanted to mention Lynn McNeil. She's a kindergarten teacher. I can't remember which school. But thank you, Firestone Park. And she's been there a very long time. And they actually had a story about her not too long ago with her husband coming in to help in her classroom. She's a lovely teacher, and she's been with us for a very long time as well. Any other things on personnel? Okay, hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Lombardi?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, abstaining from 35 and 36.
Mrs. Sims?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes.
Next, Madam President, I have before me for your consideration 6 motions and 7 resolutions on the consent agenda. These recommendations are in proper form, and I move their approval.
So moved. Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any questions or concerns? Yes, Mr.
I
Miller.
have a quick comment on item 1, our school calendar. For my pet peeve in our school calendar, it's based around agriculture still, and we really don't seem to ever try to do anything about it. Just hope maybe for 2016, 2017, we might try to shorten that summer break up so the kids don't lose a lot, and we use September as review instead of education for the kids. Thank you.
I have a quick question on item 8. Is that just part of the general tech upgrades and increased use and capacity, and that's the broadband, the additional appropriations, the 200,000?
No, so the Sprint goes back to our educational broadband channels that we actually lease those from Sprint, and so get a monthly amount, and we're actually using the funding in that line. We use that to upgrade our website, and that's the funding for that is housed in the communications department. And so when we get additional money in, we will increase the budget for that particular line item. So there is money that comes in monthly, and then at a certain point in time, we'll appropriate that money into the budget. It goes into a receipt account first.
Okay, thank you.
What about item 7? So more elaboration on that.
ATT STEM Foundation, Mrs. Buckner.
Sure. This is a program at the high school that instructional leader Johnson wrote a grant for, and so it's going to consist of 9th and 10th graders, about 20 of them, and it will include a mentoring program with the University of Akron, technology-focused leadership, where they're going to they took a visit last week to the Akron Global Business Accelerator, and they will look at doing some mentoring with them. They're also going to incorporate quarterly STEM speakers for this leadership group, and then finally they'll have a presentation of their learning experience through an electronic portfolio. And the application process ended just a couple of days ago, and he's also going to include the leadership team, his leadership council team, it's mandatory that they go through this leadership program that he has designed. And it's called Launch. And it's an acronym: learning to lead in diverse areas of life, accepting the challenge of leadership, as you can see there on the notes there, understanding the role of a leader, never giving up, choosing college as a catapult to a career, and hearing the call and knowing how to answer it.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the consent agenda? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Mainstream.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Sims.
Yes.
Reverend Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
Mr. Bravo.
Yes.
Mr. Lombardi.
Yes.
And finally, Madam President, I have before me for your consideration 8 business affairs recommendations. These recommendations are in proper form, and I move their approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any questions about business affairs?
Number 3, that's just paying one person to interpret or translate French to several people on the OGT, or one person on the OGT? Or?
It's our interpreting service that we provide to translate the OGT when students are taking it. So it's just their time to be able to do that.
Oh.
Just a quick question. On number 1, I'm assuming that's electronic medical record. I had to Google that. I just want to make sure.
Emergency medical response for our firefighter EMT.
That's EMR.
folks. Yes.
Emergency medical response records. Okay. Number 5, I just wanted to say, and let's see, it's been a minute since I've looked at this, that I'm supportive of, it's gone already, Mark's efforts, and I definitely support our efforts to compete with other schools that are using 21st century technology to reach parents and students to try and lure them away from Akron Public Schools. So I'm certainly in favor of that. I hope with some of that funding, that some of the feedback too that we've given about maybe taking some of the best practices from those more notable organizations that have been fairly successful at luring students, that maybe we'll look at doing some of those things, making online enrollment or online interest or something a little more readily apparent and available. But I'm certainly supportive, and I think Mark's been doing a really good job. I think we've seen a real difference since he started, so I just wanted to throw that out there. And can I ask a question about number 6?
Yes.
Sorry, could you maybe expand on that a little bit?
So we have a responsibility to service our parochial schools, as well through some of our federal funds. So we're it's really like a similar to like auxiliary services, kind of a pass through. But those schools will typically will pay for those services, and it's similar to us where these two will be the schools of responsibility in terms of educating. They could have been placed there, from Northwest local schools, similar to how we have students who are placed here in our district, and then we have to pay for their education.
I thought that's what it was. It looked like such a small amount. I didn't know if it was something special or, okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Sims?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardi?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes. All right, now we are moving on to our treasurer's report. For the first time, I feel like there should be a drum roll. Mr. Pendleton is going to present.
We're done. We're done. Okay, I'm going to move down to the end of the table, if that's okay.
While he's setting up, can I just throw out too, I forgot to mention, Tracy and I, Mrs. Buckner and I had the privilege of doing a trip to Detroit, hosted by the Knight Foundation recently, and so I hope at some point maybe she'll be able to share, because we were the do-it-yourself portion of the afternoon, we went separate places, and so she was able to visit a couple of really neat things, I think, one in particular, Kidpreneur, that I hope she'll be able to share with the rest of the group to find out what are some exciting things that are happening in and around education and innovation in Detroit. So hopefully she'll be able to share that with us at some point. I just want to throw that out there. Is this why David's didn't mark?
Because I messed his up. All right. As you're aware from previous board meetings, the board is responsible for preparing and adopting forecasts twice a year, October and May. And I really have to give Akron credit for kind of not following exactly along in the state's recommendation. So as the state listed in law now, October is your primary forecast. May is your update forecast. Akron does it a little differently, and I think you do it the correct way. After the first of the year, your administrative team comes together with budget meetings to put together next year's budget. It's when staffing decisions are made. It's when programmatic decisions are made. So I would say, even though the state doesn't know this, that your May forecast is your primary forecast and your October is the update. So let's put that into perspective of, you have a new treasurer starting September 1st. We have the task of turning over the books between the previous treasurer and myself and getting up to speed. So
Tonight, you'll see the forecast as it's presented and prepared by me, primarily with my revenue estimates and the district's expenditure estimates. For the May, we should be fully adopted. We should be going through the budget process with the administrative staff and with the assistance of the Finance Committee. So we'll have a more complete. So you'll see me spend more time tonight on revenues than you will expenses. But certainly ask questions. You can see I'm sitting down and purposefully do these kind of presentations in a conversation format. It's how I've worked best, so you can stop, ask questions, challenge assumptions. This is a living, breathing document. This is live. In fact, you saw me load the document from the district's shared server. So this isn't a canned presentation. This is the document that I edit every day. Quick purpose, it's just not a snapshot in time. This is a living, breathing document. We use this to certify contracts. We use this to participate in negotiations. We use this for programmatic adoption, whether or not it's a new textbook adoption, or it could be in support of business operations and how we forecast for new capital, technology, buses, and those kind of things. So you will hear me talk about trends tonight. Trends are much more meaningful than the individual numbers themselves. And again, for this forecast to be well received and a good planning tool, it needs to have the input of the board, the finance committee, the administrative staff, and in conjunction with all the different departments for it to be a good financial model. We're going to follow along right with the handouts that you had, and I did make some color copies for you tonight. It's kind of hard to follow along on the iPad sometimes, but here I can, with the Surface, I can zoom in and out a little bit easier. So the beginning part of the forecast presentation is a real high-level review. So we're going to look at some subtleties with trends and those kind of things. And we'll look a little bit more specifically into revenue, and then finally expenditures before we let you get to the bottom line, which I know is the natural tendency. Let's see how much cash we have on the books. And let's take a look at this chart. I have a laser pointer. We're going to identify some trends in these really subtle areas. I know there's a lot of information that goes into this chart. What you're seeing, though, is almost every district across the state of Ohio in this chart. We just may happen to be at a different point in time. You're seeing the cyclical nature of school finance. So let me explain that. In 2012, we know that you were going through a period of expense reduction. You're making financial cuts. You may have had some building closures. You had deficit spending going on, and at the same time, you were going toward an operating levy. Operating levy was passed, further expense reductions, and this cash balance you see starts to tick up in fiscal 14. So we have the full levy collected in fiscal 14 after all those cuts were made and the operating levy was passed. You see what every district goes through. You see us build some cash balance. And again, I'm going to jump to that the splash at the end, which is where everybody looks at, is the financial balance is $25 million. And we're going to put into perspective what $25 million and some change looks like. And you see as time goes on, and as we detail more revenue, you're going to see that it's impossible for districts across the state to keep up with inflation when revenue stays stagnant. Then you see us go through a period of deficit spending where we reduce our cash balance. So that's the cyclical nature that we just can't seem to get away from in Ohio. So the goal of, obviously, the board and the finance committee and the administrative team is to stretch that out as long as we possibly can while still providing for students. Again, really high level. let's look at this chart a little bit more in detail. In 2014, we did have a new funding model. The new funding model gave us 6.25% in fiscal 14 of additional state aid and 10.25% of additional state aid in 2015. This is coming at somewhat of a cost that we'll talk about later. As we become more funded on the state's formula, there's a heavier weight placed on every student. Right now, we're in what's called a funding cap. They're not truly funding us for every student. It's still really important for us to track all the students because we could be getting to a point within a year or so where every student represents $5,800. Right now, it's a little bit less than that. We also, in the last 6 years, have been through 3 different biennium funding models. So what comes to 2016 and beyond, I've got forecasted a 2.5% increase. I think previous forecasts before this current biennium were more like 1 to 2%. This is a high-level income and expense, simplified version versus what the 5-year forecast looks at. I think the trend to identify here is about 3/4 of the way down where it says revenue surplus or deficit. This is when your expenses start outpacing your revenues, like in that very first chart. And again, $3 million seems like a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. We're talking about 1% of our overall budget. Where we get to fiscal 19 and the deficit spend of $9 million is something to take note of. It's something to plan internally. But let's talk about the faith that we have in these numbers and specifically the bottom line. I think we all have, I've heard it either in my interviews or even at the Finance Committee, I've heard that we have lots of faith in the fiscal 15 numbers. And you see the shaded areas of 16 and 17. We have some pretty good estimates for 16 and 17. But let's not forget that we are really the only governmental agency that's required to produce a 5-year budget, when most of our cities and municipalities are producing 2, our state's producing 2. Doesn't detract that it's a good, useful financial tool to identify trends. But it gives some caution in the white shaded areas in fiscal 18 and fiscal 19 to really not look at the bottom line in terms of the cash. All right, let's put it in perspective. So our annual budgets in fiscal 17, let's go out those 2 years, is a little over $300 million. Our cash balance predicted is about $27.5 million. So one of the things that we're looking at in Finance Committee is what's best practice to have in terms of a cash carryover. So here are some benchmarks. And obviously we'll make recommendations as to what we think is best practice. So 10% of the budget's $33 million. The highest months of expenses that we've tracked back a few years is almost $31 million. 1 month's local tax collection is $37 million. A lot of districts have their cash reserve policy as, well, I want my salaries to be my bogey. So I'm going to say 1 or 2 months' salaries, and what is it? If that were up on the chart, it would be $12 million. I think, let's see, $6 million is one payroll. So $12 million for a 30-day cash run out of payroll, or $24 million for 60. Those are not uncommon, especially when you're going through bond. When S&P and Moody's looks at our financials to say what's your financial health, they'll look at those kind of measures. So what are the goals? The goals for tonight is just to take away where we're at financially, kind of what's our financial grade card. We talked about the confidence we have in the 3 years of forecasting versus the 5. at the back of the presentation, I think you've seen, I think lots of boards want to know, how are we doing from our May forecast to now? So you saw some comparison tools where we aligned. You know, we're pretty close in our estimates, even out to fiscal 18 on revenue, we're within 1%, I think, is where we were at. We already went through that chart. There's a lot to take away from this chart. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about it. In 2009, 53% of the revenue that we received to operate the district came from the state. Whereas in 2019, we're predicting almost 60%. We're going to talk about a little bit later why that is, that we're going to be maybe having an over-reliance on state aid, whereas the formula as it's currently adopted in law evolves more for us to be more on that formula. There's also a consequence here of property values, and for the first time, our property values are being taken into account in the formula relative to median income. And our median income has been slowly dropping in Akron. So our dependence on state aid is going up. The chart in front of you below talks about the previous 5-year average of real estate. So in those 5 years, we had almost a 2.5% increase in real estate collections. Whereas the projected 5-year average annual increase is negative 1.09. Akron, Barberton, Springfield, we are going through a period now of 9 years of deflation as it relates to property values. Hopefully we're seeing a trough with that and we're starting to see maybe some values pick up a little bit. Those have a direct negative impact on the amount of money that we collect from our local property taxpayers. So that 5-year trend is slightly negative. You see in the middle of the chart, state aid is at about a 4% average. And you can see it front-loaded there with fiscal 15 at 9.91%. Drop down to the bottom, total operating revenue is at 1.84%. Keep that number in mind as we get to expenses. I think we're gonna skip this chart. We're gonna go down to the end of the presentation and look at our property values and kind of see how that's calculated. I'm not going to spend any time on public utility because it's pretty stable as a forecast. I know in previous forecast in May, you talked a little bit about the tangible personal fixed rate that comes from the state as tangible tax from House Bill 66 is phased out. It's currently in law, so it is currently forecasted across the board. However, there's some thoughts from my peers that even as early as March, with next year's, after the elections and as they prepare next year's budget, we could see some earlier phase out of that tangible fixed rate reimbursement. I know Jack specifically had brought that to your attention, and that amount is about $5.6 million. So we'll keep you updated there as soon as we know something. If they were to phase that out early, it would be a significant adjustment. We would update the forecast of the state immediately. State aid. I think what you want to take away here is that relationship between median income and the valuation per pupil. Basically, you take the total value of all property, and that's the way they used to determine what our wealth was in the state of Ohio. They now, and I do believe that this model is a more appropriate model across Ohio. It takes into consideration median income. You can see what that does to our reliance on the state share from 2015 to 2019 growing from an estimated 67% to almost 75%. The risk there is we could go back to the worlds of guarantees and caps and unfunded formulas. So yes, we're going to put you on the formula, we're going to make you more dependent on state aid, but we're not going to fully fund you. All other revenue we won't talk about. Remember, I asked you to remember what that one chart in revenue looked like compared to its counterpart in expenses. From my perspective, I've only been here for a few months, but we are a very lean operation. I know what our administrative expense per pupil is. I know what our building operation expense per pupil is, the amount of square footage we have, and we truly are a lean operation. We are on the better end of those benchmarks across the state. That's fantastic. Even taking that into account, our average projected annual growth is over 3%, where our revenue growth for that same time was only 1.84. So let's talk a little bit, and again, I'm not going to talk a lot about expenses, just a couple high-level takeaways here. We're going to talk about purchase services right in the middle here. I'm not going to highlight salaries. The reason I'm not going to highlight salaries too much is because the district has completed negotiations with all their bargaining groups. Those are set in the contract. The district has a pretty good handle on the number of retirements on average, pension reform, and what that looks like, so carry forward the May estimates there. Same with benefits. Kudos to the district on the benefits in terms of negotiations on behalf of the staff and the administrative team. You had wellness, let's back up here, some people looking at their charts. You had wellness deductible buy-down programs. So it's very wellness driven, and your actuaries, the folks who underwrite your health insurance programs, give you a lot of credit for that. And you see that represented a 9.2% drop in your health insurance. So kudos to the staff and administrative team for taking that on, and basically you're reducing the expense for all of us. And that's obviously real money when you talk about $37 million. Purchase service. Sorry to jump around there. Purchase service is an area that I want to plant a seed. I want to challenge the finance committee to take a deeper dive here. This is where enrollment, this is where we want to really detail the enrollment, capture that data before it's going to the Department of Ed, to be as proactive as we absolutely can be. As you can see, purchase service and the majority of the amount there is related to outgoing funds, to community school tuition, open enrollment out, and scholarships and transfers. In 2009, I think this line item was 53 million. Did I record it down there? I did. It was 53 million. In 2015, we're predicting 75 million. It's an increase of $22 million. Most, if not all of that growth has to do with students leaving the district. As you noticed in the enrollment parts of the presentation a little bit later, the funded enrollment is staying pretty stable. It's right around 27,000. It's the choice options which take that state aid with the child where we want to spend our time. All right, I'm going to jump down to the bottom. Any questions so far? Thanks for bearing with me on the financials here.
But I will say, I think with that last slide, I mean, that's something that definitely, as a full board, we need to be taking a deep dive at and looking at, because that's significant.
Yes.
I mean, from 51 million in 2009 to 70s, I mean, a $20 million jump in 10 years and the loss of students. I mean, that's something we all need to be taking a look at and seeing how we can address it from multiple committees, I think.
This is really powerful data that I had learned about from the Ohio Department of Taxation about 10 years ago. Is something called the sales ratio data that Summit County Fiscal Office and the county offices around the state of Ohio partner with the Department of Taxation. And so far, we've been very close in predicting what our revenue growth will be in real estate. I think this is, as elected officials, I think this is really good data to identify and communicate with your constituent base. Is you see Akron highlighted there. The percentage at the top may not mean as much to you as maybe the number of sales. Go back to 2008 when kind of the global fiscal crisis started around real estate, really. And you look to 2013, down to 897. We're still 100 sales shy of where we were in 2008. 2014 data should be released by Summit County Fiscal Office within like 2 weeks. But you pair that with the median sales price from 2008 when Akron had a median sales price of 88 down to 83. And those are the indicators that ODT and Summit County Fiscal Office are looking at when they determine your home tax bill, whether or not they're going to reduce it or increase it based on that relationship. What does this mean? Right? What impact does it have for us? It basically says to us, until home prices stabilize, the 2012 and the 2006 operating levies are collecting at their max millage. So we're losing a little bit on those collections as property values decline. You saw that in that very first chart on real estate. We're at 104 million. The last page of the five-year forecast, we're at 104 million in 15 and 100 million in 16. We lost $4 million based on devaluation. We're really hoping that those property values stabilize. And in fact, there's the chart there, right there in the middle of the page. 104 million to 100 million. And you see it leveling out. Even in future, I think 17 is our next reappraisal, we're basically predicting a 0. Hopefully that sales ratio data improves where we have a little inflation going on there.
I think it gets at what we complain about most, about the way we fund public education. It's so wrong with it, right. You know. It seems like a kid's future shouldn't hang on property tax.
There seems like a lot more options from Columbus to tax our local public, right? They give us more options to tax our local public and less about funding the formula.
Right. So what are you going to do about that?
I'm going to represent you well and advocate for sure. We're not going to, this is going to be a deeper dive that Finance Committee goes into, but if you look at column A, there's our funded enrollment. 2015 to 2019, and even going back the past few years, the number of kids born into Akron Public Schools and we are able to educate prior to those options that we talked about in the purchase service is about 27,000. At the same time, that valuation in column B is declining. And again, you see that more reliance on state aid to the far right. So Tim and Patrick are going to be experts at that slide, maybe in a few months. They'll be able to explain that to you. There's our enrollment in terms of where we're predicting it. You know, I may have a little bit too aggressive out here in 2019. Again, those will be updated as we get better and more information. The blue is actual numbers, the red are estimates. It's kind of the grade card. How do we do prior to prior forecast? And you walk through those. There's the 5-year forecast. You can see the financial impact. We're very close to the May estimates in terms of where we have in cash. I'd always encourage you to look at line 6.01, the green line, about 3/4 of the way down, where we are at in terms of whether or not we're spending more than we're bringing in. And then with the creation of the Finance Committee, or to start over there about having the board really look at what best practice is in terms of appropriate cash carryover and what that cash reserve policy is. So if it's 25 million, and then we know what it's in perspective to salary, or it's 2 months worth of salary, then we can start to say, okay, fiscal 19 is a target year. Now we're going to start to align our decisions with this kind of thing. So I probably went over my time. Thanks for listening and going through all the detailed numbers. Any questions before I shut down?
Just one real quick. So the projection on the number of students, not necessarily in our seat, for funding purposes of 27,000 over the next couple of years. So the trend for births is remaining level in the city of Akron.
It might be dropping slightly. The last live birth data we had was the 2010 census. So we know how many kids are born into Akron area and how many, I think it's about 70%. I think we looked at that chart. About 70% of the kids born in Akron choose to come to Akron Public Schools from kindergarten on. So I have all of those charts in detail, and we'll really start to take a deeper dive there. Okay.
Just for the record, I personally want to be a little more proficient too in some of the, I trust my colleagues to bring me information, but I still think there's a desire that we are as proficient in some of the finance stuff as well.
I'll just our finance committee meetings will be open public meetings, so we can all come if we want to. So.
We're allowed?
Yes, everybody would.
It's required by law, yes.
Well, that ain't no meeting.
Everyone can participate.
So in a nutshell, Brian, you're comfortable with the way things look at this point?
Very comfortable. Not only, obviously, you know about fantastic resources in the treasurer's office, but we were within percent on the revenue estimates. Now, on the expenditure side, we're going to take the guide, and we'll have that with the next budget starting in May. Much better. Nothing to be concerned about.
Thank you.
Okay, committee reports tonight. Oh, let's vote on the forecast first. Oh, sorry. I need a motion to accept the 5-year forecast.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call, please. Thank you, Mayor.
Mrs. Sims?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardi?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Who's Patrick?
I think it was
David Lombardi.
Lombardi.
I second it, yeah.
Thank you.
Now committee reports.
The Instruction Policy and Student Achievement Subcommittee didn't get a chance to meet with the Assistant Superintendent, but looking through some of the documents that she gave, and maybe some of the other board members might want a copy of what new Ohio State tests will be administered in 2004, 2015, and she highlights some of those tests that our students will have to take, and those students who will be grandfathered in to the OGE, right? OGE. Of course, that will phase out, and they'll be taking a new set of tests. So I just want to share that with the board, as they're doing a fine job keeping us abreast as to all of the changes that will be made in the next few months.
Finance Committee, real quick, just some thank yous for donations. We had a donation from Jody Delameter, am I pronouncing that correctly, for Blue Book to Finley CLC. 100 hats from Akron Blind Center to Finley. Presentation on States of Matter by Cleveland Museum of Natural History to grades 3 through 4 to San Salem CLC. We have 562 one-day Metro passes from Metro System Group to Project Rise, and miscellaneous school supplies, Project Rise from Mickey Ivanov, and many cash donations to Project Rise from Elizabeth Marcius, Cheryl Sadler, Margaret Polishak, Karen Katz, Mary Jo McCracken, Michael Gould Sr., Peter Zakharoff, Marty Seminarati, apologize if I butchered that, Family Promise of Summit County, and Haven Rest Ministries, Akron Metropolitan Housing Authority, and Portage Path Behavioral Health, all of Project Rise. And then lastly, a $500 cash donation from East High 60 Plus Reunion Committee to the ECLC for the junior ROTC activities. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And I apologize for the butchering half a dozen names probably.
Always is the caveats to that. All right. Next, pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, Section 121.22G2, and I believe, no, G1, and I believe G3. I'd ask for a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Moved and properly seconded. Any questions? Hearing none, roll call.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Lombardi.
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Sinner.
Yes.